observe or agree on. I want to say that it's not a bad thing that life ceases with death. That means that life is special and unique, and we should cherish it and make the most of it. I'm out of time. Thank you.
My first question would be, how does atheism answer the question of origins, the origin of the universe, the origin of man, specifically, the universe of man?
Atheism takes no stance on that. The definition of atheism is the lack of faith in any gods. There are some atheists who believe in evolution. I think probably most of them do. But there are some atheists, for example, Buddhists, who have other creation myths. It's not an entire philosophy. It's just the answer to one question of what you believe about whether gods exist or not.
Okay, Dave, how does atheism answer the question of the meaning of life?
Not to sound like a broken record, but again, atheism takes no stance on that. All atheism means the only thing that all atheists have a consensus about is that they lack belief in gods. There are many atheists who are existentialists and believe that you make your own meaning. There are many atheists who don't think life has any meaning, nihilists. There are lots of philosophies, but atheism itself only addresses the question of whether you believe in gods or not.
Well, this answer to this question certainly has a profound impact on whether or not there is a God. And if I had a worldview or a philosophical position that does not even answer such basic questions of origin and the meaning of life, I would discard this worldview very quickly. I would discard this philosophical position and look for something else. So my third question would be, what moral foundation does atheism give us?
Again, I'm not trying to just repeat myself. The only thing atheism means is that you lack faith in God. You can have other philosophies. I don't think it's possible to be an atheist and absolutely nothing else. I mean, maybe there's somebody out there like that, but most atheists, every atheist that I know, has some other philosophy, and that philosophy answers those questions. Like, for example, if you're a metaphysical naturalist, then you have positions on that based on metaphysical naturalism. If you're an existentialist, you have answers to those questions based on existentialism, and there are many, many others.
Well, then I'll get more specific as to your philosophical position. But in this question, the two questions I already asked, and I'll ask the third question is morals. I mean, I've heard you, in discussions we've had out in the circle, criticize the God of the Bible for certain things he's done, or you would say allegedly done. What is your moral foundation for determining whether a person is a good person or a bad person? We all make these judgments. You say that's good behavior, that's bad behavior. So just as a man, what is your foundation for making these judgments, these evaluations?
I just want to point out this isn't necessarily relevant to whether Christianity is true or not, but I'll be happy to answer the question. My personal philosophy is a work in progress. I borrow a lot from many different things. I consider myself a skeptic, which means that I don't necessarily think that you can have absolute knowledge about anything, including whether something is absolutely right or absolutely wrong. An example I'm going to steal from Sam Harris here. If you're a chess player, it's a good idea to follow the rule, don't lose your queen, because losing your queen makes it a lot harder to win. But sometimes losing your queen or sacrificing your queen is the smartest move if it helps you stop from losing and maybe have a draw instead, or maybe even win. There are moral rules. Rules is a little bit strong. There are moral codes that lead to overall more happiness in humanity in the world, measurably as far as brain chemicals if you want to get into that. And I mean, I study economics, so the way that I tend to look at it is to say that a society and the world overall is more prosperous when people respect each other's property rights, when people don't engage in war and engage in trade instead and things like that. But I just want to reiterate that atheism specifically doesn't address that. That's my own philosophy, and it's, like I said, a work in progress.
So I understand you're a skeptic, and you're saying you can't really know anything in the absolute sense.
As far as I know.
As far as you know, are you here? Do you exist?
This is the Je pense bon je suis cogito ergo sum from.
Beg your pardon?
This is Descartes' argument about what can we know. Epistemology, I tend to avoid because it gets really messy really fast and we're on a timetable. But as far as what we can know, I believe that I exist. I can't prove that I exist. It's possible that we are all figments of my friend Tom's imagination. I can't prove otherwise. It's unreasonable to think that, to conclude that, because it's not parsimonious, and I have a lot of evidence to build a case against that conclusion. But I believe that I exist. As far as I can tell, I have feelings and thoughts, and I am a person. But I would never say, I'm not going to say never, but pretty much I would never say that I am certain that I exist because I can't prove that.
So you're questioning it, at least.
I'm skeptical about it, and that's what being a skeptic means.
Well, to question your existence, there has to be a questioner.
But maybe
To be skeptical, there has to be a skeptic. To deny one's existence, there has to be a denier. And Dave, if you question your own existence, if you're not even convinced that you exist, I don't see how I could possibly ever convince you that God exists. But I guess, wouldn't you at least say that in all probability you exist?
There's an infinite number of possible situations, so I can't really say in all probability I exist. All of the evidence that I have, if evidence leads to knowledge, which I can't prove, all of the evidence suggests that I exist. But like I was saying, it's possible that the skeptic in your scenario, the person who's wondering whether I exist or not, is my friend Tom, who I'm filled with his imagination. I can't prove that I'm not.
But Dave, if you were a college professor, I would like to have you as my professor. Because I could just say, well, who are you to say I'm wrong? There's no absolute truth. I believe I'm right here. You say I'm wrong. Who are you to say? Well, Dave, then I guess you don't really have any basis for hope beyond the grave, and your opinion is what? Death. That's all there is.
There's hope. It's not your hope. You leave a legacy when you die. You leave memories with the people that you touched while you were alive. You leave material things that remind other people of who you were. The energy that makes up each of our bodies, and this is as far as we know from the scientific evidence, has existed since the dawn of time. And just because it wasn't cleaved together in the form that it is now to make up each of us, doesn't mean that, I don't know how to put this, when you die, the energy that is you doesn't stop existing. It just goes on to do other things. It's recycled in the universe. It goes on to feed microbes. It goes on to feed plants, and then animals eat the plants, and you continue existing in that way.
You're not sure about that.
Well, that's what science shows, and I'm going to go with the evidence because it's the most consistent. I don't know that it's true, but it makes the most sense based on what I can observe.
All right, one final question.
One more question?
Can we get five?
No, that was it.
All right, thank you.
If we haven't gone the whole 15 minutes, I don't know.
You don't mind? All right, well, in that case, you've got another 6 minutes.
Some of those answers are pretty short.
Dave, if the God of the Bible, just for the sake of argument, assuming the God of the Bible is the true God, and he somehow or another became convinced that he is there and the real God, would you worship him? Would you account him worthy of your worship? If so, why? If not, why not?
Assuming that the God of the Bible is the real God, absolutely. I don't think there's any question. I used to, when I was a Christian, I was a professional worship musician for several years, and that was my job, was worshiping Jesus through music. I absolutely thought it was my calling, and I felt very at home doing it, and I felt right doing it. But that doesn't mean that it's true. And I have since learned more about the origins of the Bible and about logic and about science and philosophy, and I'm convinced that that's not actually factual. But if it were factual, to start with your, the initial premise here, assuming it were true, of course I would.
Why did you think Christianity for a time was true? And why did you believe it for a while in your life? I assume include some of your adult life.
Yes. It had nothing to do with reason or logic or evidence, unless you count personal experience. I was working at a church playing music, and I wasn't a Christian exactly. I mean, I was raised in a Christian culture, but I don't think that I would consider myself a Christian at that time. And one day when we were performing service, I felt a stirring while I was playing. And I set down my bass and I just stood there with my eyes closed while the rest of the band was playing and let it soak in. And I was convinced at that time that that was God telling me that this is what I was supposed to do. I later changed my mind and decided that that was me enjoying the beauty of music, which many people throughout the entire history of the world can do and continue to do and have done throughout history, regardless of their religion or their religious at all.
How much time do we have? I'd be willing to yield to one of the questions for Dave. Why don't you just go ahead and take yours?
Okay.
Really?
So, we didn't have a lot of time during the rebuttal and opening statements to go over Christianity's answers to these 4 questions. There are thousands of answers to each of those 4 questions, even within Christianity. The Oxford University World Christian Encyclopedia estimates that there are about 34,000 denominations of Christianity around, several hundred of those with at least 1 million members. My question is, how can you say that Christianity offers the best or most coherent, or however you put it, answers to those 4 questions if Christians cannot agree among themselves what those answers are?
Well, just like you say of atheism, atheists, have a general worldview that God's not there. But within atheism, there are different ideas. Some might accept evolution, some might not, or whatever. And so Christians aren't in complete agreement. But I think Christians are in agreement about the origin. They do believe in the beginning God created. I think some might put it in a more context of a theistic evolution, that God started the evolutionary process. That's not my point of view, but I recognize genuine Christians that hold that point of view. But still, with all Christians I know, their starting point is God, and it's not man. It's not just a simple sun. It's not a Big Bang. But a personal God who created personal beings. An intelligent God who created intelligent beings. A moral God who we're good moral beings. And Catholics hold that view, Baptists, Presbyterians, Episcopalians, all of them hold that view, as far as I know.
My second question is, why is Christianity the best or the most